There are two seasons in the Philippines, summer and monsoon. We are here during that second one, so it's a wet ride in the shuttle from the hotel to Manila's Ninoy Aquino International Airport, and it's raining here too. This time of year you can expect passing rains or overcast conditions, but that doesn't bother us one bit. There's not really a bad diving day here, rain or shine. Geographically, the Philippines encompass the epicenter of the Coral Triangle. After the last ice age, all marine life on Earth is said to have sprung from here. These are the most nutrient-rich waters in the world, and steady currents keep the food chain going strong. There's a sort of rivalry going on between different countries in the region, sometimes friendly, sometimes not so much, about who has the best and the most underwater critters. Indonesian divers claim that Lembe holds the title. The Filipino diving community says that they do. In fact, a lot of them call this place Bethlehem, short for better than Lembe. We climb out of Manila for the 90-minute flight to Dumaguete. Blue skies become more rule than exception, and we're feeling pretty good about things. Dumaguete City is a bustling seaport with loads of old-world charm. Once upon a time, its famous bell tower was an early warning system, alerting locals to impending pirate raids. We have found that here in Dumaguete they can do pretty much anything with a three-wheeler. I take one to the place that will be the base camp for half of my stay here. I'm here with an international group of delegates who represented our countries at the inaugural Dive and Resort Travel Show in Manila the week before. As guests of the Philippines Department of Tourism, our first stop here is at Pura Vida. This is a really fun resort with an equally fun owner. The open landscape is meticulously manicured. The rooms are quite nice, and there are plenty of creature comforts. As I said in the first reel, we are here during the rainy season. One of the cool things about that is we pretty much have the resorts and dive sites all to ourselves. And for bonus points, overcast conditions can actually make the job of lighting certain underwater scenes a lot easier. We set out on our first dive right in Pura Vida's backyard to put this theory to the test. A harlequin shrimp, and these glassy sweepers prove us right. A lionfish seems to be sizing up a pipe horse, but wisely decides that it's too big for lunch. This one seems to have stung a passing coney. Tiny porcelain crabs hang out at the edges of their anemone condos, sifting the currents for plankton. And brittle stars lounge around in soft corals. This tiny ornate ghost pipefish tries to blend in with a yellow crinoid. Seagrasses reveal a frogfish just about the size of the end of my thumb. This is a target-rich environment for nudibranchs great and small. One of our delegates is noted marine biologist Dr. Terry Goslinger of the California Academy of Sciences. We go off in search of these little beauties, which remind me of the frilly Christmas candies of my youth. This is especially true of their egg ribbons. This delicate mass is likely that of a Spanish dancer, perhaps the most popular of all nudies. We see nudies and other sea slugs by themselves and paired up. And sometimes we can't see them at all. For example, there are at least 3 of them in this shot. You can see the brittle stars easily enough. The coral mimic nudibranchs? Not so much. We go from the tiny to the immense. A particularly overcast day is about to be made way more interesting as we take one of the bancas north to Oslob, a small seaside village on the island of Cebu. This is Whale Shark Central. For generations, the locals have used tiny shrimp they call uyap as bait to attract fish. Whale sharks would disrupt the fishing by trying to get at the bait. The fishermen tried everything, like rock throwing, to try to keep the huge intruders away from their bait until someone came up with the brilliant idea of using the uyap as bait to lure them away from the boats. It worked like a charm. So well, in fact, that the whale sharks became big fans of the activity and started sticking around. Recognizing this as a potential gold mine, an enterprising dive operator started paying fishermen to lure the sharks toward his place of business. Word of the spectacle spread, and Oslo started becoming increasingly popular with tourists, and an industry was born. As you can imagine, this controversial practice has spawned disagreements of almost political campaign proportions. The activity is heavily regulated and pretty much self-enforced by villagers who want to protect this lively source of income. About 7 miles across the water from Darwin is Apo Island. It's a beautiful sunny day as we make the crossing in one of the bancas. Apo is one of the greatest success stories in the history of Philippine reef systems. Back in the 60s, marine habitats here had all but disappeared due to locals overfishing and lazy fishing with dynamite and cyanide, killing almost everything on the reef. That's when this man came into the picture. Dr. Angel Alcala and his colleagues at Silliman University, right here in Dumaguete, were instrumental in the introduction of the country's first marine protected areas. Evidence of the success of these marine sanctuaries is everywhere you look. Now that the marine organisms have a safe place to grow to maturity, populations are robust, and fishermen have more food on their tables. On top of that, scuba tourism has become a substantial source of income for the tiny little island. One example is what we call the Apo Mall, which comes to every dive boat, bringing sarongs and t-shirts galore. Turtles are among the island's most popular ambassadors. And talk about camera bait. They seem to stick around as long as it takes for a photographer to get the shot, and then some. There's something interesting everywhere we look, and life on the reef unfolds before our eyes. There's even a bommy that looks like the Starship Enterprise. Hungry slurp corals sift the water for microscopic bits of food. And anemone fish frolic in the current. Every time I come here, I find it harder and harder to leave. I often wonder what it would be like to live here. Buy a little dive shop. I wouldn't even have to change the name. The crew weighs anchor, and we head back to Negros. The Philippines are home to loads of unusual-looking shrimp, and they're everywhere. Under corals. On top of corals. On top of sponges. And sharing anemones with porcelain crabs. These were so tiny that they created something of a challenge for my eyesight. Speaking of which, this is how badly I needed to get my prescription put into a dive mask. I was able to see that I was getting a really nice, crisp, in-focus shot of this reef shrimp ravaging a hapless crab. What I didn't see until I got into the edit suite was that these carnivorous little whelks were in a feeding frenzy for their share of the feast. I also noticed that the shrimp had atrocious table manners, but I try not to judge. For me, the most interesting shrimp is the mantis. I spotted this one under a bommy and kept the camera rolling as I moved in. Fully expecting it to do what these guys usually do, which is to scurry into a hole. Imagine my surprise and joy as this scene played out. Ancient Assyrians called them sea locusts. Fishermen all over the world know them as thumb splitters. I keep my fingers to myself and follow the action. Their skills include the ability to produce sort of a concussion grenade with their claws. And even if the strike misses, the shock wave produced by the cavitation can stun or kill their prey. And don't get me started on their eyes. Today, we drag ourselves away from life underwater and visit the stock market. But this one has nothing to do with Dow Jones. This is the Malatapay Market, a fascinating glimpse into Filipino life. Established generations ago as a place where fishermen and farmers could meet and trade, It is now the local equivalent to the mall. Fishermen bring their catch from the sea, and farmers bring their commodities down from the mountains and fields. Everywhere you look, there's livestock, poultry, produce, and fresh fish, and dried fish. Lots and lots of dried fish. Refrigerators are scarce in this part of the world, so this pungent product is in big demand. By all manner of pedestrian and vehicular traffic, the livestock arrives, destined for an unfortunate end. These will become lechon, or roast pig, favored by the locals and American filmmakers. Naturally, you can get that here too. We eat our fill and get back to work. The other delegates have gone, and I moved down the road to stay with my good friends at Atlantis Dive Resort in Dumaguete. I have a lot of history with this place. It was base camp for our very first Philippines expedition 7 years earlier. We're delighted to see that several of our friends are still here, like Wing, one of the best underwater spotters I've ever worked with. Wing leads me to a pygmy seahorse, one of those holy grail shots for an underwater shooter. Their habit of constantly darting in and out of their hosts also makes anemone fish something of a hard target. While only a few of these species are officially designated as clownfish, almost all of them end up being called that. Some people consider them the free bird of underwater films and poo-poo their inclusion in them. If you fall under that category, this is probably a good time for a bathroom break. As a reward for the hard work we've done this month, our final daytime dive presents us with this dazzling scene. It's a classic example of symbiosis, with the common salt shrimp and anemone fish going about their daily routine of providing each other with food and protection. Their fame as matinee idols has its price. Anemone fish make up just under 1/2 of the overall marine ornamental trade. Only a quarter of the clownfish that end up in aquariums are bred in captivity. Therefore, the overwhelming majority are captured in the wild. This, of course, dramatically decreases densities in exploited areas. But here, today, the family revels in comparative obscurity. They exemplify the color and beauty that can be found on the coral reefs of the Philippines, come rain or come shine. From Bethlehem in the Bohol Sea, I'm Paul Cater Deaton, and I'll see you under the bubbles.